brains don't go to school. People go to school. The brain is a part of the person who goes to school. And so this whole focus in New South Wales seems to be about brains, but people go to school. And so if only some of these people would have dipped into Chapter 5, personhood, they would realise that we aren't brains, we're persons. And so we're in the business of working with persons, not teaching brains. At university, we have to rewrite our university courses to teach teachers how to teach brains. As you can imagine, it's gotten up our nose. Maybe ignorance is bliss and you could just come to school and write a few sentences on the board for the brains to memorise and Bob's your uncle. But as far as I can tell, there's a good deal more to music education than one brain teaching another brain. And they start off before the big W at the beginning of 153. From this book's praxial perspective, music is made by and for persons. Our intrapersonal and interpersonal experiences of music making, listening, feeling, knowing, teaching, learning, everything we possibly do, desire, feel, think, etc., trace back to the fundamental issue of what it means to be the kind of living entity that possesses, undergoes, and acts and performs his or her personhood. That's pretty dense, hey? If so, then any effort to develop a reasonable philosophy of music education should attempt to develop basic perspectives on what it means to be a person, living in his or her social cultural worlds. As educative musicians and teachers, we have an ethical responsibility and a practical need to understand the people we serve. Whoa. So this is why that statement about brains gets up my nose, because people of all ages, in all kinds of learning situations, are first and foremost holistic persons. The optimal learning environment is a community of mutual respect, shared responsibilities, joyful and meaningful learning, and a context in which learners feel they're safe, secure, and welcome. In such spaces and places, personhood is treasured as much as musicking, listening, and musical products. The optimal learning environments, not those in which top grades, perfect musical performances, and strict classroom control are the highest priorities. Holy heck. Holistic persons, optimal learning environment is a community, and then all of that stuff that we've kind of talked about over the first 4 chapters. It comes back to what we've read about in this book about persons first rather than music first. And the music should serve the people, not the people serve the music, essentially, which is easy to say, but quite difficult to do, I think. Music serves the people. Conceived as musical, moral, ethical communities where everyone receives and enjoys respect, acceptance, and personal fulfillment to build and maintain sustainable and resilient learning environments to support and enhance students' happiness, intrinsic motivation, and ardor. An understanding of personhood is an essential part of knowing why, how, when, where, and what to teach at any given time. We're trying to get these 3 pillars. What is music? What is education? And what's a person? And from that understanding, that guides our action. And you can see there's lots of focus there on community, and this is a lot to take in. But essentially, we're trying to get to, in this chapter, all of these things that are going on to make a person. And so over the course of the chapter, they break that down. I think this is really important to keep in mind because there is so much certainty going around at the moment. But Elliott and Silverman say, as you look at this diagram, good luck. We love their diagrams. Keep in mind that because no one knows for certain what personhood is, and no one has identified and mapped all possible components of what personhood may be, or how these components interrelate, it's just a heuristic device, which is another way of saying it's just a rule of thumb rather than a rule. It's a work in progress. Yes, sorry, that's what they say. A working model that provides a partial idea of what we're getting at. These words, I think, can change the way you think about the work you do. Summarize the embodied, enactive, empathetic, ecological concept of personhood and consciousness. And so that's changed my life. So as a result of reading this, I don't look at my students and see a room full of brains. I see embodied and active, empathetic, and an ecological concept of personhood and consciousness. And so as a holistic conceptor, I reject dualistic notions that a person is 2 separate things. Here we go. We call this the Cartesian split, thanks to René Descartes, or Descartes. There's a bunch of ways. It's to say this word second, that one. We could go on. So it's called the Cartesian split after him, and he is misquoted as "I think, therefore I am." And so his view that we were a mind inside a body. But in the last couple of 100 years, we're thinking about this idea of an embodied concept of a person's body, brain, and mind operating in relation to the world are completely dependent on each other. They are fused. Subtract one component and the others cannot exist, hence our unified term. And so this is really important for D&M. We need hyphens again, just like we have the musician, teacher, learner. We need a body, brain, mind. It's all the same thing. And ideally, it's only a body, brain, mind because our writing is linear. It's more complex than that, but it's a unified term. So let's break that down. Embodiment means that the body is not a puppet controlled by the brain, but a whole animate system with both interactive and autonomous systems and varying degrees of openness to the world that create its sense-making. So as musicians, if you have a concept of music as a doing, this is really exciting because we do things with our body, brain, mind. So we're not coming to class to get information into our brains. We're coming into class to experience music with our body, brain, mind. That's pretty cool as well. So that changes everything, I think. It changes what it means to teach, what it means to learn, what it means to experience. Personhood includes and combines a functioning human brain in a living body interacting with complex physical, social, and cultural environments in an ongoing flow of experience. So they go on over the chapter to argue for that. And I think this is really worth having a good dig into ourselves about, because I think there's pretty good evidence for most of us of this. Knowingly or not, there's that phrase again. I feel like doing my Tom Rajelski, knowingly or not. Many teachers assume mind-body dualism is correct. For example, everyday discussions are full of dualistic statements that divide personhood into separate categories, not only body and mind, but cognition and emotion, perceiving and responding, thinking and feeling, performing and listening. So it's really powerful and really turns a lot of stuff on its head and gives us an opportunity to go back to those kind of organic musicking experiences that I'm sure we've all experienced and go, that's a really legit way of learning, of experiencing music. I didn't have to write it down, and it didn't have to be written on a whiteboard, and I didn't need a PowerPoint presentation. It was something I experienced in my body, brain, mind. They do a lot of stuff because this dualistic notion is so embedded, right? And so stealthy as an assumption. They do a lot of work to try to break that down. Person is a joint project, emerges from, lives in, and develops because of his or her dynamic, ever-changing reciprocal relationships and interactions with others. So this is really exciting for us as music educators. This idea of fostering opportunities to interact with others. That's at the core of becoming, as Frary says, more fully human. Becoming ourselves is, according to D&M, is a result of interacting with others in our worlds. How's your world? And I is an I because there is also a you and a me, a we and an us. Oh, I get all funny when okay, and blah, blah, and blah, blah. So some really great, but it only got a yellow highlight, and so we'll move on. What we perceive is determined by what we do, or what we know how to do is determined by what we are ready to do, because our body, brain, mind, first, no body, no brain, no body, brain, no mind, no body, brain, no conscious awareness, and no non-conscious processes. Unless all of these dimensions and processes are engaged with numerous dimensions of a person's social context, there'll be no personal meanings, no sense of identities, no thoughts, beliefs, emotions, perceptions, memories, experiences. Music education happens in contexts, and those contexts are linked to the person and their personhood. Persons constitute each other as persons by treating each other as persons through acts of idealization. So thinking about what a person might be, an ideal of a person. Isn't that beautiful? Implicit in our interactions with and idealizations of others as persons is what Donald Devo calls the principle of charity. By charitably interpreting the other as a person, I make him a person. So the idea of charity there is thinking about the best possible ideal version of that person. Treating a new student in your class or a new person with a charitable, opening, and welcoming stance involves an act of idealization that includes the assumption that her aspirations and your aspirations for her are achievable simply because she is a person. Oftentimes, we get caught up with high expectations, of which I've been quite critical in my writing. I think sometimes people confuse high expectations with this idea, the principle of charity, which I think is much hipper. We could talk about that as we go along. To treat students with respect and charity is central to the flourishing of individual students and the community. Unconditional care. So now we're starting to get into Nell Nodding's territory. The centrality of another crucial component of practical music education, unconditional care. And this has changed a few people's lives. One of my students from the master's degree at the conservatorium a couple of years ago, when I shared this story, general conversation, went out and got a tattoo of turtles, which is one of the great moments in my life. I think he's a bass player on the Central Coast. This is cool. If Atlas holds up the world, who holds up Atlas? Atlas stands on the back of a turtle. What does the turtle stand on? Another turtle. And what does that turtle stand on? My dear Dimitri, it's turtles all the way down. I love that. And that comes out of a book that I'll show you one day. Then we get on to consciousness, and that's heavy C. So we've got B. What are we up to? Body, brain, mind. And then you have your consciousness and your non-consciousness, your C's and your NC's. So see how this is so much richer than a brain. And I think the reason people love the brain is you can just go, la, 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 I'll just pop all of that complex stuff off to the side and just give me something really simple. But it doesn't work that way. You're just sticking your fingers in your ears or fiddling while Rome burns or something. Persons as embodied. So this idea that our knowings and our knowledge and our learnings are in our body is pretty hip. And changes the way you think about, well, I've got to assess people by writing stuff down. If knowledge is things in your brain and learning is writing down, then that's that. But what if our learning is embodied? And of course, as usual, John Dewey, in Experience and Nature, laid it all out for us because he is cool. If we fail to realize we're multi-layered embodied beings and that our bodies are inscribed with our bodies, this is just stuff that many cultures have as part of their knowings, right? It's just part of their culture. And our bodies are inscribed with meanings. There's no way to understand, appreciate fully the exquisite ways of our body, brain, minds, facilitate the nature and development of our sense of I, you, and we, and our first-person phenomenal consciousness of our world's environments, community contexts. There's little chance of understanding how we carry out music and listening and how musical experiences affect us in so many ways. So you can see that this concept of personhood is so important because of the flow-on effects. So let's finish off then. Start and continue to search for the aims and values of education. So why are we doing this? And music education, where they are. In the nature of personhood, people's interactions with each other and individuals' musical and educational desires, felt needs, dreams, and musical emotional experiences, both personal and interpersonal. That is pretty cool. Where do we look? Personhood, people's interactions with each other, individuals' music and educational desires, their felt needs, their dreams, and musical emotional experiences, both personal and interpersonal. And so when we think about educative evidence-based practice, when we start to talk about students' values, needs, and circumstances, this can be a really great tool to start to think about. Imagine as we sit down to plan these teaching and learning experiences, which we call gigs, the kind of amazing stuff we could do.